Hi, and welcome to my performance portfolio on guitar for BMO's Contemporary Music Performance Year 3. For this recital, I was required to create a 30-minute performance consisting of set works provided by tutor Luke Bradshaw, a looped piece, and my own pieces. I decided to perform for the set works Day at the Beach, Song for George, Cavatina, Cliffs of Dover, and Room 335, which was to include an improvised arrangement. My loop piece was my own arrangement of Redbone by Childish Gambino, and I chose Minor Swing by Django Reinhardt, Happy as Larry by Alex Hutchins, and East West by Larry Carlton. Due to COVID-19, the recital was recorded on GarageBand on my Mac and uploaded online with no editing to YouTube. Firstly, to prepare for Day at the Beach, I decided to use my PRS electric guitar as my acoustic guitar was set up for drop D, and I wanted a smooth transition between the songs in the recital. Therefore, I decided to use my PRS as I didn't want to tune halfway through the recital. This was all decided with the intention to perform live, so I still wanted to keep that part in my video cycle. I wrapped a scarf around the top of the neck of my guitar as this song was all tapping, and it was necessary to mute the vibrations going towards the head of the guitar and make the notes going towards the pickups and the bridge clearer to play. Along with this, I used a compressor on my CS3 to make the levels on every note even, and one characteristic of this song is the reverse delay. I believed it was a reverse delay that he uses throughout the whole track. I researched what type of setting he used because I understood that it sounded like a reverse delay, but the settings that I could get weren't working as well as I thought they would. Therefore, I researched it and found that he used a stack delay with two DD3s by Boss. So I used my DD7 on a short delay and a long delay on my RC300 to give a go. However, I still couldn't get the sound right, so I used a reverse setting on the DD7, stacked with the long delay on the RC300, and found a good sound with this. I used GarageBand to record, and I found a good tone that I liked, which replicated that of a Blues Junior, which I would have used in the live performance anyway. Once I was happy with the sound, the main focus was keeping the tempo consistent and accurate to the main track that I used as a reference. One difficulty I found was to get the tapping correct. Even though the compressor helped, keeping the right pressure on each note took some time to perfect. Overall, I'm most happy with this performance out of the whole 30 minutes, as I believe Song for George was the most successful. Next was Song for George by Eric Johnson. I decided to use my acoustic guitar and set it to drop D to accurately replicate the sound on the original track. For recording, I kept the amp simulator settings the same as Day at the Beach, however with no delay, an acoustic simulator on my guitar set to around 50%, which gave a nice reverb to it, and kept all the levels on my acoustic halfway. The phrasing of this piece was the main focus for me. To get the passages correct to Eric Johnson's was a challenge and took a few weeks to correctly perform. I used 9-gauge strings on all of my guitars. However, for this song I used 10-gauge to get a thicker tone on the higher strings, which I believed worked more successfully. To get Song for George accurate as the original, I spent a couple of weeks playing along to the track at 60% speed until I was confident, and then moved up by 5% each time until I had it to 100%. This was the main method I used on all of the songs in my recital, and it allowed me to accurately perform the correct phrasings to my best ability in a live setting. Cavatina by John Williams is a classical piece, usually performed on a nylon string guitar or classical guitar. The intention was to book out one from uni. However, with that no longer being possible, I used my Taylor T5Z on the bridge pickup setting with the treble down to recreate the sound as accurately as I could. The difficulty with Cavatina, like the previous two songs, is that they were all unaccompanied. This put a lot of pressure on making sure the songs sounded perfect, as there were no backing tracks to fall back on. Another issue is to remember each section of the song, which I found difficult at first as I kept missing the coda, and that was something I worked on whilst I started to progress in sight reading. I researched other renditions of this piece on YouTube, such as Per Olav Kongren and Anna Vitkov, to broaden my own interpretation of this piece. At 1 minute 25 of my performance, I adapted the single note line to be more free rhythm, like Kongren's, as I believe it added to the piece and gave it more of a relaxed approach, which fit more to the arrangement in my opinion. If I were to change anything, it would be to perform on a classical guitar as I intended, and to hold the guitar as a classical musician would, to look professional during the recital. Cliffs of Dover was one of my favourite songs to perform. I changed the amp simulator on GarageBand this time to a Marshall stack, as my research showed Eric Johnson used a 1969 Marshall model 1959 Super LED 100 watt head with a Marshall 4x12 loaded with 8-ohm Celestion G12 80 speakers. I used my PRS guitar on the neck setting along with overdrive from my OD200, a medium delay on my DD7, and slight reverb from my RV6. The reason I chose my PRS was due to the fact Eric Johnson used a 1954 Stratocaster in the introduction of Cliffs of Dover. Therefore, I used the coil tap to the single coil setting on my Fishman Fluence modern pickups, and then tap them back to humbuckers for the rest of the song. There were 3 main riffs proven to be difficult in this song. Therefore, I learnt the 3 at 50% speed, and then as I learnt the rest of the song, my knowledge of these fast licks grew. My looped piece was Redbone by Childish Gambino. I researched online other looped interpretations of the track before trying out for myself. I used 2 RC300 loop stations with a MIDI sync, with one set to slave and one set to master. The drum beat was consistent throughout, so I used track 2 on the slave loop, as that's a force of habit that I've had whilst I loop over the years. One issue that arose were the loop lengths of the track. I set the drum beats to 1 bar, which established the tempo, and this meant I could press each other track loop starts, and then they would automatically end for their allocated bar lengths, meaning there were no jumps or loops and everything was quantized together. The other issue is that I set bassline A to 4 bars, I set the keyboard A to 4 bars, and I set the octaves to 8, as that was the length of those phrases. However, bassline B was 6 bars, meaning that there were 2 bars rest between each phrase and made a more junky performance. To solve this issue, I turned the tempo sync on to allow the tempo to match with the rest of the tracks, but turned the loop sync off. And this meant that when I pressed track 3 on the slave, bassline B, the loop will start at beat 1, no matter where the other loops are in their bar lengths. This proved to be successful for the rest of the song. For the chorus, there was a 1 bar rest for all the loop tracks whilst the melody carries on, and then I hit all on for the chorus and quickly turned the bass loop B off before it started to clash. If there were any changes I could do to this loop performance, it would be to pre-record little layers inside the song, as the original track had a lot of layers through it that kind of joined in and grew, and that was something that I was incapable of doing myself without pre-recording material. Minor swing was next. Gypsy jazz has always been an interesting genre that I wish to explore further in the future. Django Reinhardt's 1930s version of minor swing is what I based my recital on, and I believe the settings I used on my Taylor T5 worked perfectly with the type of song. If I did have more time, I would have bought a traditional Django Reinhardt guitar and played it the way that he did. I did explore the way of playing with 2 fingers as he did throughout his career. However, I wished to have more of a fluid movement, therefore played the way that I was comfortable with. Happy as Larry was one of the most difficult pieces I chose in this recital. I chose this to challenge my ability at fast legato playing, and Alex Hutchins is a great master of this technique. I thought it would be easy to recreate his sound. This, however, was more challenging as I could not get the right sound that I wanted throughout my Ibanez. So that is one piece of the recital that I regret the most, is that the tone for this song wasn't as good as I hoped it would have been. The main challenge for this song were those legato licks. However, whilst I challenged myself with these licks, such as with Cliffs of Dover, I learned those licks first and carried on for a couple of days until I had them at 95% speed, and then I learned the rest of the song, allowing me to understand how these licks moved and got used to do it without having to think. Room 335 by Larry Carlton was a set piece of work, and this required me to play the exact version as Larry Carlton did for the A section and the B section, and then I soloed, and then the same as Larry Carlton for A and B. This is not what I did in the recital. What I did was accurately replicate Larry Carlton's A and B section, and then I improvised, and then I took inspiration from Alex Hutchins' version of the track for the final A and B shown in adaptation throughout the song, which was a slight artistic interpretation of Room 335. I chose to use my Gretsch guitar for this, as I enjoyed using the vibrato on my guitar, and I thought the tone best fit that of a Gibson 335, which this song is based off. For the improvised section, going from D major 7 to F sharp, I used F sharp Phrygian dominance, going into a 251. As I researched the chords, I found these scales the best to use. The 251 in G, I chose off a sax line I heard from the real book, and the F sharp Phrygian dominant I used was just a series of descending arpeggios. For the rest of the song, in the A section, I focused on playing A major pentatonic licks, blues licks that I've learned, blues jazz licks that I learned over the years, and then transition to C major 7 licks for the rest of it. Going back to the A and B section, which I adapted, if I did have more time, then I would have learned more legato licks similar to that of Alex Hutchins, just to finish off the piece, and maybe add a little improvised closed section at the end. In conclusion, I chose a range of genres for my own pieces just to expand my knowledge. It was great to play cavatina as it taught me many techniques in classical guitar that I can then transfer over to my own contemporary style. The loop piece allowed me to expand how I play during live gig sessions with my loop pieces. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed.